the co-founder of Insight Seminars. And the topic of the event tonight, of the workshop tonight, is very relevant for me personally, because we live in a political, economical instability and financial instability in different parts of the world. And connecting to our intuition and the unknown is key part of having a graceful journey in the present moment. So, Russell, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And choosing this topic for the workshop. It's a great pleasure and honor for Insight Seminars UK, Europe, and worldwide to have you here. You're muted. I'm afraid you need to unmute.
Thank you. I've never done this before. Oh, brother. So funny. I must do 5 to 10 of these every week, and every once in a while I forget about my mute button. So there you go. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I wish I were in London itself, as I have visited, yikes, I don't know, at least 100 times. But virtual is better than none at all. And to know that we have people from all the way from Kalamazoo, Michigan to New Zealand and all the spaces in between, it's really delightful. So as we do this exercise tonight, I want to share a little information with you. I want to give you an opportunity to share amongst yourselves with some of the questions that we'll raise. And then we'll have an opportunity to do some direct sharing and even questions and answers with me as best we can. So that's kind of what's in store for you. I'm also very open to what might show up that isn't planned. And if we're going to be talking about intuition, it's not something you can schedule on your diary. Tomorrow at 3, I'll have an intuition. It shows up when it shows up. So in that spirit, being present in the moment is probably very useful. So I'm going to start and share my screen. And here we go, I think. Come on. So a basic question that will be present throughout is this simple one. What are you seeing that is not yet visible? Now, about 12 years ago now, or thereabouts, I was in New York City and I was visiting with a very dear friend. Her name is Frances Hesselbein. Frances has worked in the nonprofit sector for perhaps 50 years, and she's done remarkable work. She would not be pleased with me telling you that she just turned 105. She still teaches leadership in some major universities in the US. Quite a dynamic woman. I had not seen Frances in probably 15 years. And immediately on meeting her in her office, she didn't say, well, Russell, how are you? Or what have you been up to? Or what's new? Or all the usual things we might say. She asked this question: what are you seeing that is not yet visible? And it was just an incredible, incredible question. It connected some dots for me. And I'll just give you a wee insight into that. Back in 1978, I had already created Insight, and John Roger, who was my mentor and teacher on many levels, he and I were having a discussion in September of that year. I was about to go into a eye surgeon's office the next day for a procedure called radial keratotomy. And it was designed to correct severe nearsightedness or short-sightedness, depending on which country you live in. And it puts little slits in your cornea, and it flattens the lens and changes the focal point back to the optic nerve, and you can see. So as I was getting ready, he said to me, you know, Russell, there's probably going to be a great success here, but something you should know is that whereas the problem is now physical with your eyes, the source is not. And I kind of looked at him askance and I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, yeah, it's physical now, But the reason is that for years now, you've been straining to see with your physical eyes things that you can only see with your spiritual eyes. And all of a sudden I went, oh. And that began opening me to that door of what does intuition mean? When Francis asked me that question, it connected that dots all the way back to John Rogers' question about seeing with spiritual eyes. So it might be helpful to know that the word intuition derives from the Latin word intuere, which means to look at, to consider, or to observe. Now, it's pretty hard to look at something if it's not there to be seen. It's pretty hard to observe something that's not there to be seen, and it's pretty hard to consider something that doesn't exist. So there's an a priori condition to intuition, and it means something already exists, something that can be seen. But as John Roger advised, if I look with my physical eyes, I may not be able to see it. And so it's again, Francis's question, what are you seeing not yet visible? Well, it is visible, just not the ways we usually think of something being visible. So pardon me while I look away and I'm trying to make the slides change. This is a lovely quote from Jonathan Swift, which just went away. Vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others. Now, this principle, as you can see, was known back in the late early 1700s. So there's nothing new to this process, but it may be new to me, it may be new to you. So as we go along, I want to ask you a couple of perhaps sort of odd questions. And here kind of goes the first one. Have you ever known something and some part of you just knew it? And maybe it was a cautionary knowing. Oh, if I do that, that won't work out. Or this isn't a good idea. Or maybe I shouldn't trust that person. Or it could be any number of things. But have you ever know it and then blow it? Or blow it? And so inside of yourself, just ask yourself, have you ever known something and you kind of go, oh no, I knew it. I just knew it when something didn't work out. Now, if you resonate with that, if that matches your experience, just kind of put your hand up and wave it a little bit so we all know, yeah, you're part of this group too. Okay. And I always ask that to raise a hand, not so that I need to know anything, but so that that part of you that's inside notices. And what do I mean by that? So it kind of goes like this. Have you ever had a thought you wished you weren't thinking? Any hands on that one? Do you ever have a feeling you wished you weren't feeling? Well, if you had a feeling you wished you weren't feeling it, or you had a thought and you wished you weren't thinking it, who noticed? And the obvious answer is I did. But how can I notice a thought? Because the thought is not who I am. It's just something that I hold or capture. And there's a whole, I think I did something on this before in a webinar with the UK. I know I did one with the South Americans and the Spanish speaking world. There's a lot of neuroscience out there right now that indicates that thought is in fact measurable and detectable outside the body without needing a physical device attached to the body. So if you're interested, you can do some little research on it, but it's very interesting that thought is virtually tangible, it's communicable. And John Roger always used to say, well, you're not responsible for the thoughts that come into your head, just the ones you hold on to. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but now it makes great sense. Sometimes thoughts come in and they may be generated from someplace else. But intuition is the notion that there's knowledge available to me if I will attune to it. Now, I asked the question, did you ever know it and blow it? The other side is, did you ever know it and grow it? Have you ever known something and later when it showed up, you went, I knew it. And so it's kind of interesting. I can go, oh, I knew it, or I can go, yes, I knew it. Now, have you been there? Something really good took place, something worked out, and some part of you just knew it. Raise a hand again. So again, the reason I'm asking you to raise your hand is not for me to know, but for you to notice, just like who's thinking the thought, who wishes the thought were different. I want you to notice whether this applies to you in your own life, because it's really important information. The notion that I'm wanting to share here is that we have a source of knowledge and information. In insight, we call it the wisdom of the heart. And we do a whole section there about how do you access inner knowing, natural knowing, we call it. But this is part of what this is about. Remember, intuition comes from the Latin intuere, which means to look at or to observe. And that means it's there to be looked at or observed. Now you have to understand that when that word was invented to describe this phenomena, that was, I think that was in the 1500s, may predate that. But this idea has been around for a long time. Nobody knew it, or nobody invented it, they just knew it. And so I like to say, I can know it or blow it, or I can know it and grow it. And probably you've all had that experience that you knew it and you grew it. So I like to play with little words there because sometimes that just helps some part of us remember the principle a little later on. Well, if you can know it and blow it, or you can know it and you grow it, what's the difference? And the difference is that sometimes when the information comes in, we kind of look like that. Block the ears, don't tell me that. Now, have you ever been around somebody who actually is like this little kid? They just don't want to hear whatever the information is. And in today's highly politicized world, there's a whole lot of that going on. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff being said that probably isn't worth listening to, but the person is worth listening to. So I'm always a champion of when someone holds a point of view or communicates something that I don't want to hear, I have to notice that that offends some part of me, but the person is worth being honored. And so I always like to respond with, that's interesting, tell me more. And try to get into what really matters to that person at a deeper level. And when we start to connect with a person, we can actually have a conversation around an issue instead of a fight. And for that process, I call the difference, well, can we have a dialogue or do we need to have a diatribe? And dialogue is preferred for me. So if we're listening, we may be able to hear. We may be able to see, so the metaphors are mixed. We have inner hearing. I have a book that I'm just about to have published in the next month or so. It's called From Self-Talk to Soul Talk, Becoming More of Who You Truly Are. Now, can you relate to the part of you that can criticize yourself? Arianna Huffington, formerly Stasinopoulos, who in fact brought insight to the UK back in the 70s, she talks about this negative self-talk as being the obnoxious roommate living in her head. And I love that frame. Where does this obnoxious voice come from? Where does this self-critical thing come from? And the challenge with that is that many times information is presented to us inwardly, and that self-critical person inside goes, no, that can't be, which is a little bit like, if I can get it back, that one. There's somebody about that age inside of each of us that sometimes just goes, I don't want to know that. Stop it. But the deeper self, our true self, is the one who's truly wanting to listen, who's truly wanting to see, who's truly willing to be educated, to lift in their own experience of life. And so that was, again, this is a picture of Frances from about 15 years ago. So she was only 90 then. Looking pretty good there, Frances. What a wonderful woman. But what are you seeing not yet visible? So that's a question that we want to explore. So what I'm going to suggest in just a moment, we're going to move into some small breakouts. And I'm going to ask you to have a conversation with one another. And these are the four main areas of question. Can you recall a time when you knew something ahead of time? It was either that sense of foreboding or forewarning, or it could be the sense of like deja vu. You're being shown something in advance, you know something in advance, you're being guided. So if you can relate to that, either something blew up on you and you knew it before, or something really turned out well and you knew it before, how did you know it? Was it a sense? Was it a feeling? I mean, some people see these in crystal clear images. There are all kinds of cases of people who are being shown literally diagrams of a thing to be invented. And they see the physical diagram at an inner level and they just transcribe it into the physical reality. So recall a time when you knew something ahead. How was it that you knew it, or you sensed it, or you saw it? Did you grow it or blow it? And what does that tell you? What lesson can you take from that experience? And reason I'm asking this is that just like I asked the question, have you ever known it and blown it? Or you knew it and you grew it? Is to begin integrating those at least two aspects of who we are. The one who is critical and resistant, and the one who's expansive and curious. And if we can get a sort of a balance working in there, we can start to learn to use even the critical self. When an idea shows up inwardly and it goes, I doubt that, another part can say, well, but wait, what if it is true? And then you can start to engage the skeptic of who you might have inside of you to help you discover. In the work I've done in organizations, I always look for the skeptics. And there's two kinds of skeptics. There's what I call the positive skeptic, and the positive skeptic goes, I doubt that that will work. Let's examine it. And they're willing to learn based on experience and experimentation. And then there's the negative skeptic who says, that won't work and I'm not playing. And that person is doomed to live in the bucket of their ignorance if in fact something will work. So in this case, we're trying to integrate the two aspects of self. I mean, I still have a very negative critical self inside. I mean, I can be very self-critical when I make a mistake. And that's just what's there. It's not a bad thing. It's just something to notice. Now, if I live in that negative self, then it becomes a very negative experience. So trying to notice, I have a negative limiting self that denies that I know something. I have a positive expansive self that's open and receiving. So with that in mind, again, recall a time when you knew something ahead of time. Did you know it and grow it? Did you blow it? How did you know it? How did you sense it? And we'll just make this a free form discussion amongst yourselves. We will not be having a partner A or a partner B for those of you who are used to that, but we'll go back and forth and be willing to ask one another a question. Well, how did you see it? Or, well, what did that look like? Or how did you notice? So we can begin to get a little deeper into that process of what we call natural knowing. About 5 minutes in, we'll have someone come on and say, there's 5 minutes gone and 5 minutes to go. And this will be your time to share. When we come back out of that, we'll then see if there's something that anyone wants to share with me and the whole group, and then we'll move on to a little bit more information. So with that in mind, shall we break ourselves into the breakout groups? I was on an airplane, an American Airlines DC-10 in Chicago, Illinois. I had finished running an Insight seminar there, and I was preparing to fly to Los Angeles. I had been upgraded to first class, and I was sitting in seat 4B, which I will never forget. And we're at the gate, and I just started feeling uneasy. And I kept hearing, get off the plane, get off the plane. And I had no reason to just get off the plane. So it kept going. And I finally just stood up, and I had 2 bags in the overhead. So I reached up and I grabbed them, and the purser said, Mr. Bishop, what are you doing? And I said, I'm getting off the plane. And he said, why? I said, I don't know. I'm just not supposed to go. He said, oh, come on. And I said, no, I don't know. I'm just not supposed to go. So I got off the plane, went back into the terminal, and a half hour later, the plane crashed on takeoff and everyone died. Now, that's pretty dramatic. Not every intuition is that dramatic, just as not every intuition is dramatic as Yoli's, unless, of course, they are. So leave room for guidance to be showing up. Now, that doesn't mean if, oh, I feel like maybe I should jump off the cliff, that's necessarily a good idea. You have to use some other kind of checking devices. But the thing I most rely on is going in and trying to access that. Now, back in '79, I didn't have a lot of tools, but I kept listening going, this keeps coming up, and it's coming up stronger and stronger. I'm just going to pay attention. So thank God I did. But we do have these things available to us. Now, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and hopefully we're back okay. So this becomes a question that some of you in the earliest of Insight seminars will remember. We used to have, I mean, this is back old timer history now, but on the first night of Insight, which was back then was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, all day, Saturday, Sunday, on the top of the stage, up on the, just below the ceiling, was a little tiny, maybe not even a meter long sign, and it said, what are you pretending not to know? And we didn't pay any attention to that. We didn't call it out. The next night, it was about 2 to 3 meters long. What are you pretending not to know? And by Friday, it was about 5 meters. What are you pretending not to know? And the question that we were asking people to consider is, you are accessing knowledge and information. Those of you who've been through Insight know that we ask lots of questions. There's not a lot of telling you what should be true. We just ask you. And when people say, I don't know, well, if you did know, what would the answer be? This is to kind of unearth the possibility that there is knowledge and some part of me is denying it. And we just call it pretending not to know. We can each get in a lot of difficulty when we pretend not to know something that is being presented to us. The inverse of that, however, is also true. What am I pretending to know? Now, I know in my own career, there have been times when I've gotten into circumstances where I think I should know something, or I don't want people to find out that I don't know something, and I've pretended to know something beyond that which I actually had access to at the time. So the key word is pretending. I either know it or I don't know it, but I may be pretending not to know it when I do, and I may be pretending to know something I don't. Learning how to access and tell the truth to myself about what I know really opens up the possibility. So again, if I'm presented with inner knowledge and I go, well, I don't know, then a part of me that has access will honor that and say, oh, okay, fine, you don't know. So we won't bother presenting you with any more information right now. And that's a really important point to consider. As we access intuition, and I put up this little slide here because it pretends that intuition is resident inside the brain. And yet we see all of these other connections across the screen, which if we start to get into the world of quantum mechanics and non-locality and non-duality and whatnot, there's a lot there, which then points me to one of my reminders here. Intuition is the Latin for looking at or considering. And one of the favorite people I have of all time was Einstein. And he wrote over 100 years ago, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational is a faithful servant. However, we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Now, he for those of you who really are interested in physics and whatnot, he's an interesting guy to look at from a very long time ago. But he was a precursor to what Bohm was looking at in terms of the nature of consciousness. But Einstein would say, you know, you can't affect any atom anywhere without affecting other atoms everywhere because of the interconnectedness of consciousness. Well, that may strain a lot of our abilities to understand because most of us, myself included, are not physicists. But if you just get to the notion that information exists and we have ability to access it, that's all we're talking about. How do you give yourself permission to access? How do you give yourself permission to know? Just another one of his lovely quotes: logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Well, imagination is part of the intuitive process. And if we don't allow ourselves to entertain the imagination, if we deconstruct that word, it contains the word image, and the back end of the word ation, English, French, Spanish, a lot of Latin languages, you might as well just pretend that they left the C out. Instead of ation, it should say ACTION. It means action. Imaging it in and acting it out is part of what imagination is. Intuition is the same thing. Look at, consider, or observe internally, and then act on it. If we don't act on it, the value is lost. Information is not an intellectual exercise, it's information informing us how to act. And it shows up in different forms. So I'm playing a little word game with you, but it's really important if you really want to understand language. Words were created to move energy from point A to point B. Now, what passes for language these days are definitions, which are boxes that says this word means this, but not that. And that can be useful, you know, if you want a mug for something hot and you want a glass for something cold, it's nice to have the distinction. The glass can hold something hot, but it may not be easily held by your hand. The mug can hold something cold and it's fine. But if someone said to me, hey, I'm thirsty, I need a glass of water, and all I had was a mug, I might say, oh, sorry, I don't have a glass. Well, that would miss the point. The reason these words were created was to move energy from point A to point B. The reason people speak words with one another is to move energy from point A to point B. And it could be, hey, will you come with me on this journey? Or will you show me how to move on this journey? Or can we find another alternative? There's a lot of ways to play with that, but just keep in mind that we created words because energy needed to move from point A to point B. I could do a whole seminar just on that, and have. It's a great topic to start looking at what words mean and what they come to mean as divisiveness, when what they were meant to do was be inclusiveness. Really big issue. Alan Alda has a lovely quote about intuition. It says, at times you have to leave the city of comfort for the wilderness of your intuition. What we discover can be wonderful. We can discover ourselves. Most of us are more comfortable with the way our rational mind works, but comfortable is simply a function of being familiar. So what do I mean by that? There's a lot of work that's been done over the years about comfort zone. And to me, it almost always misses the point, because it defines comfort zone as being comfortable, and people don't want to leave what's comfortable. Well, I like to ask people, do you know anybody, or maybe yourself, who engages in a sport that's dangerous, skydiving, or decidedly uncomfortable, you ice climb. Well, those can be very uncomfortable, and yet a person can be very comfortable in them. And if that's hard to understand, think about a firefighter and the fire brigade. Those people have jobs that are decidedly not comfortable. I mean, running into a burgeoning building would be very low on the list of, ooh, that sounds comfortable, let's go do that. And yet the firefighter has to be extremely comfortable in the presence of all that heat and danger. How do they get comfortable? They simply become familiar. So comfort really is a function of what we're familiar with. Well, how does that apply to intuition? Well, if we've got that self-talk and that true self-talk, but we pay more attention to the self-talk, we get comfortable and familiar with the logic, the rationality, all that kind of stuff, but we don't have much comfort with the intuition and with the softer voice. The more familiar we can become, so the more practiced we can become in listening or doing that inner exercise I mentioned before, dialogue, the more we become familiar and therefore more comfortable listening to the inner voice. Now, for the men in the room, this can be more challenging than for the women in the room. And this is just a little neurology, pretty weird to take a look at, but when a male fetus is developing, and I forget the precision, but I think it's around the 3rd month, I can't remember now, but that's when testosterone begins to be produced in the male fetus. And testosterone begins to dissolve connective tissue between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Now, doesn't always happen, but well, I don't know how to say that. It always happens, but to a greater or lesser degree, but you can build practice moving back and forth between the left and right hemispheres, between the logical and the sensing, between the awareness and the reasoning. Women can move back and forth more easily. Now, that's another thing, you know, don't take my word for it, just do some neuroscience research and you'll find it's really interesting what happens there. So if you're male and you're not really comfortable with this irrational side, it takes some practice. But if you build practice, it's like building any neuromuscular pathway, any habit pattern. You can begin to get comfortable accessing these deeper levels. Didn't know I was going to share that with one. Here's something I love from Rumi. Respond to every call that excites your spirit. Well, that's another way of saying access your intuition, pay attention, listen inwardly, because there is a call coming. There is something that is being spoken inwardly from yourself to yourself. Now, sometimes when the intuition shows up, it's impossible. Says pride, because I didn't invent it. But it's risky, says experience. Hey, I tried that stuff before. Whoo, look out, this could be dangerous. It's pointless, said reason. There's no way to figure this out. Hey, give it a try, whispered the heart. And I love that little framing. So at this point, what happened? I thought I'd pause and say, any questions that you might have? And so just raise your little virtual hand and be happy to. Let me help you right there. Because some of what you have assigned as an explanation may not be as helpful as what I will say the truth is. So you were able to come into an awareness of an ultimate truth, is that it's all vibration and it's all energy. So physics tells us that the universe is only made up of energy. We cannot create it nor destroy it, but we can change its form. Now, for the people and the logical mind, Einstein didn't say the logical mind is the devil, get rid of it, nor did he say the intuitive mind is the that will get rid of it. It says the intuitive mind is the gift and the rational mind is the servant, which means the rational mind can help implement what the intuitive mind perceives. So let me give you an example of vibrational frames of reference that can be proven at a certain level and then not. So have you ever seen light shown through a prism?
Yes.
So when we see light, we just see light. But when you shine it through a prism, we see it broken into some color palettes within the spectrum. However, that's not all the colors there are. That's just all the colors that we as human beings have sensors in the eye to perceive. Now, there are some people who cannot perceive red or green. So you try to tell them that the gray they're looking at is red, and they go, "What are you talking about? It's gray." Well, the person who sees the red because they have the receptor to see it, and the person who doesn't. And if you could do a little looking at what does an eagle have as perception abilities, well, they can see precisely information that the human eye can't perceive at all. Light and sight are vibrational. Sound is also vibrational. And just within humans, men are more sensitive to low vibrations in terms of perceiving it than most women, and most women can perceive higher vibrations of sound than most men. But a dog can hear something none of us can hear. Well, that doesn't mean that the sound the dog hears doesn't exist. It just means we can't hear it. And now, if you want to take, I'll go one or two more examples here. I think it was 1954 or 56, there was an international convention that settled on, from music points of view, the middle A of a piano to vibrate at 440 hertz. So if you've ever been to a classical concert, before the concert begins, the concert master, that's the first chair violin, comes out and plays his or her A440, which he or she previously tuned to the piano's middle A440. Then the whole orchestra tunes to that A440. So A440 is now an international standard for tuning orchestras and pianos. If you have a room full of pianos, this is basic physics, but it goes to what you're talking about in terms of vibrational energy. If you strike the A440 key of any piano, every other A string in the room will vibrate with it. Physics also tells us that the multiples of it, the 220s and the 8As, will vibrate also because they're within that frequency range. So what you're saying is you were gifted with the ability to perceive frequency, and that all life is simply frequency, and we are vibrating at different levels. Now, that's really hard to articulate, especially to someone for whom they don't have any reference point. Most people don't even know that there's colors to be seen beyond what their eyes can see, or sounds to hear beyond what their ears can hear. And so if you tell them, well, I just heard this or I saw that, they may put you away either physically or at least sign you off as, well, that person's nuts. And when you get into certain fundamental religious practices, they then tell you you're possessed by the devil. Well, no, it's just perception of what is, because life is a function of energy, energetics, and vibration. And learning to vibrate at different levels is what's important. Now, some people, we vibrate at the same level and we get along great. Other people vibrate at different levels, and it's like playing an A minor and a B flat, and it kind of goes clash. Well, there's whole symphonies for A minor and B flat, but put them wrongly together, they don't vibrate well together. So that's part of what the human condition is about, is finding the frequencies we vibrate with. And then if you get really skillful and you were gifted with this awareness, You can learn to adjust your vibration to match the vibration of who you're with. Now, I don't know if any of that's helpful. So I think we may have time for another question. I don't see a hand up. Well, okay. I briefly showed this, but I didn't intend to at the time. I love this other quote from Rumi. We are stars wrapped in a skin. The light you are seeking has always been within. And I love that notion of light because light illumines. In the previous slide, I used the metaphor of a lighthouse. A lighthouse shines the light, but it doesn't direct anybody or anything. It just says, here I am. And it does two things. One, it says, you're entering an area of potential danger, but it also sheds light to safety. So if you embrace what Rumi is saying here, hey, there's a light and a lighthouse we're seeking, and most people are seeking it from an external point of view. That light shines from within, and it always has been. So one of my favorite Rumis as well, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. So let the light that shines from within guide each of us into our own true self. And the true self is where the nature of wisdom and intuition live, because they're one and the same. So let the light illuminate your heart, reveal your soul's wisdom. That's me if you need to contact me. And my old book on business stuff, I don't have the cover of the new one yet. So thank you very much. Let me turn it back to Gaia and
Russell,
say thank you,
so
everyone.
much.
God bless.
Russell, thank you so much for sharing your light with us. It was a real pleasure, and I deeply felt connected to the topic and everything you've shared.